Ruby, I think the floor is yours.
All right. And can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes.
All right. Great. And I call it a peace planet. And this is a planet that we can, as individuals, thinking, thoughts, actions, make positive changes by working together with our individual differences and still come together for positive changes and supporting and just teaching these upcoming generations, hey, yes, the land is important, the planet is important, this earth, the world. So with our new generations thinking about the earth as well as the children, about the trees, the grass, the water. I once had a fall, more than once, but as I was sitting down, a tree just fell behind me. And people kept running up to me and they were making sure I was okay. And I was, there was no problem. And that was only maybe about 3 months ago. So we have to be careful of our planets. And when we talk about Earth Day, we're talking about time right now that we're coming together with the sun and the moon and the stars and, all of these things. We're coming with what we need to do. Earth Day was an annual event in 1970 that it was April 22, 1970, which was a part of a need to support the planet in what it's doing. And it was just one day, but now it's come to be a whole month. Even though we say it's April 22nd, it's still, we're considering what we need to do regarding the sun, the moon, the stars, and also on this planet, the water, the earth, the air. So as I've had this on here before, I'm gonna have to just change things a little bit so I can see, because we have like maybe 193 countries and we've got 8 billion people. And I don't know if that 8 billion was my my great grandbaby that was born in January, made the population. And we know India right now is outgrown China. So India is the largest in the world. So when I see things happening now on this planet, I want to respond and just read this poem by William Stafford. And it was in response to, what does the word earth say? Which is his thoughts about what the earth was saying. So the earth says, have a place. Be what that place requires. Hear the sound the birds imply, and see its deep riches go behind each other. Some people call their scenery flat. They're only pictures framed by what they know. I think around them rise a riches and a loss too equal for the chart, but they're absolutely tall. The earth says, every summer, have a branch that's minimum, one tree, one well, a landscape that proclaims a universe, a sermon of the hills, hallelujah mountain, highway guided by the way. The world is filled. Reduplication of mirage, flat evening, a kind of ritual for the wavering. The earth says, where you live, what you wear, the kind of color that's your favorite is your life. And by listening with the same bowed head, sings and draws all things into one song. Join the sparrow on the lock and row that easy way. The range without what meant. Within the guide, you anywhere the wind blows. So listening, I think, is what the word said. And that's by William Stanford.
That was William Stafford, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. You know, he started poetry because he was a conscience objector and he
Yeah.
was in a CPS camp. And he got up before dawn every day to write a poem.
And he also was, his father was out of work.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't a rich child.
Mm-mm.
And he was from Kansas.
Yeah.
And he went to, he graduated from the University of Kansas and he was a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Thank you, Anthony.
Could we ask Rick to tell us about next week?
Next week? Yes. So we have a presentation by a group that Rose introduced us to, the Wildlands Conservancy, and to be part of what's turning out to be basically a month-long look at the environment and issues around conservation. So hope all of you guys can join us.
If I may just say, just so you have a little bit of a picture here, this is a very well-funded organization. They have what they call their angel donors, who must be extremely rich people. And they are buying up the most beautiful bits of land all around California and all up the West Coast, conserving it wonderfully. I mean, I've visited 2 of them. I'm hoping to visit a 3rd one this weekend. And then they're having outreach to local schools, bringing in kids from the local communities and open to the public. I mean, totally free. I was there on what day? It was a Thursday, it was Maundy Thursday. And it was absolutely full of people, totally respectful, all ages, all ethnicities, largely Hispanic, but all ethnicities were there. Just the most beautiful thing. And I hope they'll bring us some pictures. I mean, their places are just incredible. And I know it's not our normal peace and justice, but they are bringing peace and justice to that part of the environment and hopefully getting the next generation on board, which is why I really wanted us to talk to them. It's a bit on upper. Usually we have downers. This will be a bit of an upper, I hope. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Carolfrances, over to you.
Thank you. And no, that wasn't, I don't see that separate from the peace and justice work. It's just exploring Mother Earth, which is what I'm going to be talking about. How many of you were here last week when I gave a reflection? Because I'm going to build on that. 1, 2, 3. Good. I am going to review what I'm doing today is an extension of what I wanted to do in my 5-minute reflection and had to really rush through it. So when I found out we didn't have a speaker, I said, okay, I'll do it. And the first part is going to be on learning. It's the work of learning what the earth needs from us, what the task in front of us is in terms of saving life on the planet. And the second part is going to be things that we can do in art, either writing poetry or drawing pictures or even taking pictures that bring us closer to Mother Earth spiritually, that bring us into a realm where we can communicate with the earth by contemplating this leaf, this blade of grass, that sparrow flying through the land, or whatever. I see people when I walk down a street and I'm enjoying just, I mean, I hate to see trash around, but around that there are beautiful green growing things, and I see people walking the other direction and just completely oblivious to it. So I want to bring us closer to that love of our beautiful planet. The second part. Well, we're going to start off by, oh, by the way, did anybody besides besides Ruby bring a poem? Because in the, Rick did, great. In the presentation, I said, if you have an earth poem, bring it. So is Rick the only one that did? I don't see any other hands. Okay. I'm going to start off with a poem, and then we're going to get into the work of learning about our planet and what she needs. Life choices. Choices there are between living like we have no choice and living like making choices is our way of living. Living like it matters that our choices could drink dry the Ogallala aquifer, leaving our future to thirst. Living like an olive picked from an exquisite ceramic bowl and popped into the mouth, squishing a sweet wave of flavor over the tongue, has something to do with a Palestinian child watching big machines crush grandma's olive trees, washing a bitter wave of tears over her eyes. Living like the yanking out of those ancient roots can be felt in the earth tremors beneath our feet. Living like these pretty twinkling lights are fed by impulses jumping through the wires that carry away the childhoods of those who live on land where the coal had been left untouched until yesteryear. Sorry. Living like no quest for modernity for ourselves can mean bombing Iraqis back into their Stone Age. Living like those warm salt water foam drops splashing over the Cuban lovers as they sit on their ancient seawall, kissing hope in their revolution, commingle with Mediterranean drops squeezed through the straits and Arctic drops melted from the ice caps, and with all particles of moisture on this great water planet, recognizing these same drops as they rain down upon us. And yes, even as they pulse through our veins, living like the earth is alive and her very ability to give us life is in our hands. So I am going to ask those of you who were here last week for my reflection on Mother Earth to see if you can remember anything I said. And you can unmute yourself if you were, and you think you might want to say something. I'm going to ask 3 questions. If you know it, just call it out. Don't even bother raising your hands. If 2 people start talking at once, we'll deal with it. All right. First, if the current consumption of resources continues into 2050, what will we need to sustain life?
Another planet.
What?
Another planet.
Another planet, you got it. We would need 2 Earths. Thank you, Anthony. Okay, second question. The ratio of 5 to 2,000, 5 being something about an African family in Africa, and 2,000 being an average family in the United States.
The amount of water they use?
What?
The amount of water they use?
Yeah, it was like 20 gallons or something versus 1,000 gallons or more for us, right?
Yes, thank you. Yes. the amount of water that is used, including if you eat beef, then the amount of water, that's exorbitant amount of water needed to raise the cattle so you can have beef. Yes, 2 out of 2 so far. Let's go for the third. Military has emitted 1.2 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases since their so-called war on terror. What is that the equivalent of? Twice the number of all the cars in the country.
Oh, yeah,
today.
that's right. Mhm.
2 out of 3 isn't bad. Okay, you were thinking and you remembered something from a whole week ago. Okay, when I was looking into last week, I was looking into what the holy books of the 3 Abrahamic religions say about the earth. And one of the things that I didn't get to say because I was trying to cut this down to 5 minutes instead of an hour, was that I read that in the Quran, it says that the human beings are more like the rest of the non-human animals, than they are different. And that really struck me as being very similar to what the indigenous people whose relationship to the earth I admire so much, the indigenous people of the Americas, that sense that we are part of, we're not separate from the non-human animals. And this holy teaching in the Quran is very similar to what St. Francis gave us. So I'm going to share this chart that I shared before, and I want to see if, again, if you were here last week, go ahead and say, what is this chart about? What are all these circles here? Can you see everything now?
Go a little bit further to the left if you can, a little tiny bit.
Okay. Go.
Okay, it's all right. It was the end of the page anyway. Yeah.
The circles represent what? All those dots all over? Ooh, nations. And they're color-coded.
They're color coded by landmass, right? Like what part?
No,
No, by use of the environment. Within
no.
biosphere's average capacity per person, low development and high development.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, the circles represent populations. How, not necessarily how much land they have, but how much their what their population is. And here's how they're color coded. You see the reds or North America and Latin America and the Caribbean, scarlet being North American, crimson being the Latin American, the Caribbean. Europe's are blue, dark blue or light blue, depending on whether they're part of the EU. And of course, Britain was at the time. The greens are Asia, chartreuse being Middle East and Central Asia, and the dark green being Asia, Pacific Islands, and the orange being Africa. The size, you see a couple of these have rings as opposed to filled in circles, which means their population is
Less
more
than a
than
billion?
more than a billion.
More than
right.
a billion. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I think that's what you meant.
I'm
And
failing the test so far is all I know.
and this I found totally fascinating, and we weren't able to get into it at all last week. And that is, there are some countries that they give us a diamond for where they were in 1975, and the circle represents 2003. So we're going to look at those this time. Now, these two important lines, somebody was sort of, Rose, I think you were saying, what's this line about the biocapacity? Somebody? Whether the country is living within its biocapacity. In other words, these countries are not hurting the earth. This country is. If they're higher than this line, this is their ecological footprint. We want it down. We want all these countries to be down there. But at the same time, we want them to surpass this line, which is the threshold of what? If you can read sidewards.
High development.
Mhm.
But I have an issue with this, actually, Carolfrances, because it's capacity per person. I mean, China and India were both underneath that line, and their population is so vast. I mean, it's a gray area here somewhere.
No, you have a certain biocapacity for the number of people you have. Each person is allowed a certain amount. If you live in a country that has a greater population, that doesn't mean that you have to deal with less, or that you can't do for your human development something that would put your country over that line. Is per person. So what we're going to see when we come back to this is these countries, even if they're huge in population, have lower per person, what their people are not using more than that person has the right to use. And of course, if you have more people, you're going to have expected to be able to use more resources. So we want countries to pass this line, because that means on the average, that means they may have homeless populations, but on the average, their country has, the people have what they need to survive and have a happy life. So what we want is all these countries to be below this line and to the right of this line. Now we're going to look at these trends. Let's look at this circle right here. What does this mean? Somebody want to tell me what this diamond here up to here means?
Change in those many years.
Yeah, what kind of change?
Negative.
Well, negative in what way?
Well, they've got more development, and they've also moved further over. They've moved diagonally. I mean, they've moved in both up in development and up in using the resources of the planet.
Exactly. And which one is more? Or the amount of going this way, amount of taking their people into more highly development. Is that less than or more than their ecological footprints getting disastrous? We can see this is shorter line than this. So it's nice to have an iPad and an iPhone and a laptop. However, having all that and not having an earth able to sustain life ain't gonna do it. So let's look at Australia. Someone?
They've actually reduced their they've actually increased the threshold while they've lowered their ecological footprint, right?
Excellent. All right. Italy.
They're on the same trajectory as the US,
Mhm.
where they've increased both.
Excellent. Good drawing connections. Hungary.
Well, Hungary's increased its development without, and their ecological footprint has gone down just a little bit.
Very, very good.
Okay, I'm getting it.
Yeah, you're getting it.
Yeah.
And they crossed the threshold in the process.
Yeah.
They went from not serving the needs of their people on the average to on the average serving the needs of their people. Okay, now we're going to go over here. And people say, oh, the human race is the responsible for all the devastation in the world. These countries are just as much part of the human race, but they haven't. So it's not the human race, it's the capitalist countries, the countries run by people who don't really care that are destroying life on the planet. It's not the human race. Okay, how about Brazil? Right over here. Yeah.
It looks like very recently they've started to creep up into both negative metrics, right?
Yes. Well, the fact that their environmental footprint has crossed this threshold, they blew it. But on the other hand, in terms of human development, they almost have crossed this one. And so we want everybody in this blue area, right? Does anybody remember what the one country is that it, by the way, this is World Wildlife Fund information. It's not like some communist organization came up with this. This is based on UN development. Who is this?
Cuba.
Cuba. All right, good. Somebody better remember that. India. Look at India. It has gone from way down there to here. And they haven't really increased their human environmental footprint. So that's really good. That shows it can happen. And China, how about somebody who hasn't spoken up yet? Okay, somebody who has spoken up.
Well, if I'm tracking, India and China on this graph may present the most progress toward the box that Cuba's in.
Yeah, very good. Now, China's gone up a little bit. It's close to having too much of an environmental footprint, but it's not quite there yet. And it has done tremendously well at getting people out of serious poverty. Korea, the Republic of Korea,
Didn't have a track.
right here.
Yeah.
Has crossed the line. South Africa has done this strange thing of shooting forward and then falling back. Okay, this is what I want us to think about in terms of understanding the task ahead of us. We need to bring these countries down, and we need to bring these countries forward in terms of human development, and bring these countries down in terms of their ecological footprint. Now, these countries, like the United States, always say, well, we don't want to come down to their level. We don't want to give up what we have. We want to bring them up to where we are. What happens if we bring all these countries up to where they are? To Earth by 2050, that we don't have to Earth. This graph of what the world's population would live like if everybody in the planet lived like these countries. So we see if everybody in the world lived like Bangladesh, we could survive even with a huge population of billions of people. We could survive on a whole lot less land than we have if we all lived like they did in Bangladesh. So anybody want to say anything about what this says?
Well, can you go
Yeah,
back
this
to
is
the
Michael.
graph?
I'm sorry, I got on late,
No, what
but
happened? I guess, okay, there we go.
If I'm reading this and it's so impressive, if the whole world lived like the United States of America, we would need over 4 planets.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You got
that's
it.
very.
yeah.
So,
Am I audible? This is Michael.
Hi, Michael.
I got on late, but one thing that struck me both in this and in the other one is that not everybody in any country lives the same.
Yeah.
In other words, there are people in the United States now living probably at the level of Bangladesh, actually,
Yeah.
and we don't always recognize that. And
Right.
also that in terms of the imprint of countries, we don't, a lot of the imprint of China is actually production for the United States because of the nature
Yeah.
of the global economy, that we're exporting our ecological devastation and putting it on other people's accounts, but it's really for the market here.
That's true.
Just a couple of thoughts.
Good
I
point.
appreciate this stuff,
Yeah.
but I also think that there's other layers of the onion. So
Yeah, and if you look at India and China, and well, all those countries actually on the left-hand side, the rich in those countries probably live a far more extravagant life in actual fact than even rich people do in America. I mean, it's the inequality in those countries that we're looking at as much as anything else. I mean, the millions of poor people in India in particular are why it's there. It's not because Indian people are any more environmentally aware than we are. It's because they've just got so many very, very poor people.
Mhm.
well, I'm also, the idea of development, that needs to be unpacked a little more clearly to take into account disparities of wealth and so forth. But that being aside, it looks like it's possible to increase development without necessarily increasing environmental footprint. And it also looks like it's possible to have growth, to have development and even decrease ecological footprint. That's the good news from what I've been seeing here. So clearly there's going to have to be radical changes, and income inequality and disparities of wealth have to be addressed. But there's hope in this chart, as well as some very disturbing facts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's exactly what I'm hoping to convey.
Carolfrances, given Michael's and I think Rose's points, I wonder what a graph would look like if you said, what would the world need if the elite,
Mhm.
super wealthy in the United States, was spread across the earth. I mean, in other words, they are overusing the resources and have such a huge footprint. Just roughly, it could take 20 planets.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Very
and
good.
that helps break out, I think, what Michael was getting at, that
Yeah.
some of these statistics obscure the internal disparities.
Right. That's what I was saying when I said they may have homeless people in this country, but it's the average. And yes, I think it would be very interesting if they did this sort of graph, or the graph that we saw from the World Wildlife Fund in the United States, and just,
Yeah, I think I'm getting what Michael and all of you are saying. If we had another graph that was based on class rather than nation,
Right.
if what the 1% of the world consume, would be a very interesting observation. It might help people to realize that we need to check the power of the morbidly rich.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's called balance. When we think of the world, which is what has been happening, is we've been out of balance, where there's a need for water, or there's a need, or the air, or things are happening. So it's important that we see what the other part has a need for, and that the rich understand being rich is supporting others that aren't.
Yeah.
I do like, Anthony, how you framed it as morbidly rich. Because I think that how we frame the conversation is very important. There are shows on TV about people who hoard newspapers in boxes and things like that, and their neighbors and friends think they're crazy. When people do that with financial resources and land and things like that, we put them on the cover of Fortune magazine. And I think that needs to be unpacked, and it needs to be, in a way, weaponized, where it's the same pathology as someone who hoards anything else. There is a need, that there is a hole that is trying to be filled in someone's ego. And or like Michael said, neurotically rich.
Necrotically rich.
Necrotically rich. That, I think that's great.
Yeah.
When you have people who own more than they could possibly use in their lifetime, and they're destroying lives throughout the world in order to gain more, yeah, there's definitely something neurotic about that. Why is it that Africa, you saw all those orange circles way to the left, why is Africa so underdeveloped and so impoverished?
I
Let's
think
get to critical race theory.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wait, say that again.
I said, do you want to get into critical race theory? I'm just saying, we managed to kind of destroy a lot of Africa.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When in fact it's rich.
Yeah, between taking so many of their populations and forcing them into other countries on ships, and coming in as colonial powers and taking over. We look at Leopold, the King of Belgium, who turned what is the Congo now into his own private slave camp. And then people say, oh, African people are not as bright as we are. They're not as industrious as we are. No, it's because of racism. And so we're going to talk about environmental racism for a moment. I first heard of environmental racism when this African-American stranger was looking at the book, and he showed me the paragraph he was looking at. And it was a quote from some US businessman who said the best place to dump carcinogenic waste is in Black and other poor communities, because the people have no power to fight you. That is the essence of environmental racism in this country and throughout the world. It's dumping things and building things that are environmentally horrible in communities where they feel those people don't have a way of fighting back, but they do have a way of fighting back. In 1982, protests erupted in Warren County, a predominantly Black community in North Carolina, over the plan to place a hazardous waste in landfill in their community. Following these protests, the Environmental Protection Agency investigated 3 similar landfills in southern states like South Carolina and Alabama, and found out they were all located in Black or low-income areas. So if it hadn't been for those protests, we wouldn't know it. But that is sort of what began people's consciousness of what environmental racism looks like. Who can name for us the most well-known case of environmental racism and ultimately victorious struggle against it, led by people of color?
I don't know whether it's the most famous, but the oil in South Central LA. I used to teach in a school right by where all the oil was leaking, and we could smell the oil and everything from the school. And that was in a very poor part of LA.
Okay, that's definitely a good example of environmental racism. What is the case that everybody in the world, probably if they have any sort of connection to news here? Do you remember Keystone?
Yeah, Keystone Pipeline. Yeah.
Keystone Pipeline, led by Native Americans, because if that thing leaked, it would get into their water system. And it's like, well, we can put it through here. There's nobody living here. I remember when I was working with indigenous groups, I learned that uranium mining in Navajo or Dene nations would cause these pools of water that were left over, and kids would play in it because, you know, you're in this arid area and there's water to play in, and they'd break out in horrendous sores. And what some people call that is, well, these places like the Dene Nation are national sacrifice areas. They actually had that term, national sacrifice areas, meaning the people there can be sacrificed because they've got brown skin, they're brown or Black, and, you know, it doesn't really matter. We can sacrifice them. Leonard Carolfrances is in prison because of the fact that the government was signing over to U.S. Imperialist 1/8 of the reservation. I'm going to go on. We'll do all kinds of talk back at regular times, but I want to make sure I get through this. Here is a good story that I hadn't even been aware of about the struggle in California against environmental racism. California's then Attorney General Javier Becerra, our state's first ever Latino AG, established a Bureau of Environmental Justice within the environmental section of the California Department of Justice. The Bureau's mission is to protect people in communities that endure a disproportionate share of environmental pollution and public health hazard. This is being accomplished by oversight, investigation, and enforcement of the law. According to the website of the current California AG, quote, of the nearly 30 lawsuits that he, Becerra, has filed in a federal level, almost half have been aimed at ensuring that our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water. Attorney General Becerra has not lost an environmental lawsuit to date. We hope that the maxim, as California goes, so will the nation, holds true in this case. It is encouraging to know that Becerra, my once congressional rep, is now a national cabinet member in charge of health and welfare. So let us look at environmental racism globally. Who can tell me who Mohammed Nasheed is? Anybody remember hearing the name?
Oh,
Does anybody remember this? If you were watching Democracy Now!, you definitely heard it, but it was a pretty good publicity stunt. It really got a whole lot of coverage. Mohammed Nasheed was then the president of the archipelago, the Maldives. Anybody remember? Because the archipelago of Maldives is so low-lying, so flat and close to the surface of the water, if the water levels rise from global warming, it would wipe out the entire archipelago. There are no mountains they can flee to. So what President Mohammed Nasheed did is he had his whole cabinet don their scuba diving outfits, and they had their cabinet meeting underwater and passed around this document that they signed underwater. And it was a very successful publicity, what would be called a publicity stunt, but hey, it brought a lot of attention to this problem. Mohammed Nasheed was the first democratically elected president of the Maldives, a low-lying archipelago in the Arabian Sea, also known as the Indian Sea, off the southwest coast of India, after enduring at least a dozen arrests by right-wing forces, in which times he was sometimes tortured. One military coup where he was removed from office at gunpoint, one period as an exile in England, and a near assassination by a bomb explosion. He's back in office, working for the environment, currently serving as a Speaker of the People's Majlis, which is their Congress. He's an ally we need to watch. So the rest of this time is going to be on spiritual closeness. Rick, you brought a poem to share.
can I just make one point before you get to that? Something that I think is kind of interesting. That I've seen in lots of reports recently that the world human population is actually cresting and going to go down. Especially starting in the richer countries. And I think that that is really a glimmer of hope for the future.
However, if an African family, no matter how big it is using up 5 gallons of water for every 2,000 gallons that a US small family, yes, it is good that the population growth it needs to be reined in on, but we also need to look at how much each of them is using. So Rick.
Yep. So when I was thinking about what you wanted to do the presentation on, and by the way, you didn't say last week that any of this would be on a test this week. I just want to point that out. as a former school teacher, you know. But one of the things that I was thinking about was that for me, environmentalism and conservation is all within the idea, the rubric of mindfulness, understanding where each step that you take lands, and how you affect the world at large, and how you can see layers and layers of the world. The quieter you get, and the more still you become. And one of my favorite poets that really embodies that idea is the late Mary Oliver, who was a brilliant poet, and very, in a way, she had like this Hemingway simplicity, but this amazing flow. And the poem that she wrote that really strikes me is one called "The Summer Day," and I think everybody has probably heard it at one point. So it's called "The Summer Day." Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who's gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Who was that, Rick?
Mary Oliver.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I don't know that one, but that is great. And it really leads into what we're doing, because we're going to be looking at photos and then thinking about how we can get in touch with Mother Earth, commune with her through the writing of poetry to her in second person. In other words, you flowers blooming on that in front of me, you sparrows in the tree that I hear but I can't see, you impress me with this or that, and I'll give you an example of that. But
Carolfrances, before we do, can I share a poem? I was going to share the same poem.
Oh,
but that there's another poet who's really spoken to me, coming from an environmental perspective, and that's Thomas Berry. And the the poem that I think speaks well to what Wendell Berry. The poem that really speaks to what I think Carolfrances and what we've been getting at is called the Mad Farmers Liberation Front, a manifesto. I know. Have any of you heard this poem?
no.
Okay,
And
well,
who's it by?
Wendell Berry, and he is a farmer poet, an environmentalist, and this is his poem called "The Mad Farmers Liberation Front." Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay. Want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbor and to die. And you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. So friends, every day do something that won't compute. Love the Lord, love the world, work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who does not deserve it. Denounce the government and embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all you cannot understand. Praise ignorance, for what man has not encountered, he has not destroyed. Ask questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted in the mold. Call that profit. Prophesy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Listen to carrion, put your ear close, and hear the faint chattering of the songs that are to come. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. So long as women do not go cheap for power, please women more than men. Ask yourself, will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Go with your love into the fields, lie easy in the shade, rest your head in her lap. Swear allegiance to what is highest, nighest in your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Those are both great poems. Thank you. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some photos and we're going to think about getting in touch with Mother Earth by writing poetry to her in second person and drawing sketches of her. So, how many of you walk? And I don't mean walk from your living room to your dining room or walk from your front door to your car. How many of you go on walks and, maybe 30 minutes for health, or maybe just, oh, I got to go to the store and it's down the street. I'm not going to drive. I'm going to walk.
I go about 4 times a week for about between 20 and 35 minutes.
That's great. So that's great. That's great. How many notice?
I stopped walking, and that's probably what I need to do, because I used to just walk
Right.
around the block. I was a walk runner, where I would run a little bit and then walk a little bit.
That's good. That's what we should all do. And notice beauty around us, even photograph it.
Yeah.
Pictures are ones that I've taken mostly in the Koreatown area around Emmanuel, but some in other parts of Los Angeles. Stop and listen to bird songs. I know if you're walking for health, you're not supposed to stop. You're supposed to walk vigorously for 30 minutes, but I notice bird songs and maybe even sketch them. Maybe not on your walk, but sometime just go out to where it's beautiful, whether it's your backyard or a park or wherever, and just see beauty. What we're going to do after looking at these is we're going to look at a poem that I wrote for Mother Earth in second person, where I'm addressing a sycamore tree, one of my very favorite trees. And then we're going to talk about sketching, not to be like the greatest artist in the world, but just sketching in order to become closer to Mother Earth and commune with her as we draw her pictures. Now, these are lovely, and in my neighborhood, they're in a number of places, but not only are they beautiful above us, but even below us. just when they lie there on the ground. And this is a sycamore leaf. I love sycamores. And people I've heard one woman say she didn't like sycamores because the leaves turn brown and they fall off. But I think they're beautiful just lying on the ground even. And tendrils, this is actually on an urban farm where a woman was planting these. But tendrils are really, really get to me. And I love bird songs. And sometimes I look up in a bush and I hear this beautiful music coming from it, and I can't see the bird, but I know they're in there. Birds, for all the majesty of the eagle, the splendor of the peacock, the wonder of the hummingbird, the whimsy of the penguin, and the grace of the egret, it is the tiny common sparrow where walks me tenderness and touches me with nature's spirit. And there are so many different trees. If you just start noticing, this was my first introduction to sycamores, and it was at UCLA, and I lived near UCLA, and I used to go out here anytime I got a chance, and I was teaching, and if I wanted to read my students' papers or just write poetry or whatever, I'd just come out here.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. That was beautiful.
And these, you know, I used to not like palm trees. Just sticks with on the top. But now I'm seeing they're just really amazing. This is almost on my block, and it's just like it just blows me away every time I see it. Roots of trees.
Yes.
And these, I don't know about where you live, but where I live, all of a sudden after this rainstorm, as a friend of mine saying LA was trying to become Seattle, all of these weeds were gorgeous, huge puffs of green life. And grasses even are just amazing. Now, as we honor Mother Earth, let us also honor Father Sky. When I saw this, I was walking home and I was delighted to see this young couple, probably a couple in their 20s, taking pictures of the same thing. And I was really glad to see other people notice the beauty around them also. I don't know where the birds came from, where they're going, but once a year, when I'm walking, there's just these amazing creatures dancing in the sky, just to be dancing. They're not going anywhere, they're just dancing all over the skies. And if we notice a beaver dam built by beavers, we don't say, well, that was made. It's not part of nature. We say that's part of nature because bees are part of nature. If we see a honeycomb, we don't say, bees made that, it's not part of nature. We say bees are part of nature. So if we look at human beings as part of nature, as part of the world, as part of Mother Earth, then what she creates in beauty has to be part of nature also. So here's my poem to a sycamore. It's called Ode to a Sycamore. Thank you for your magnificence, O sycamore. I give thanks to your mighty roots on which my bare hand, to your great trunk on which I lean my back, to your outreaching limb on which I rest my head, to let my eyes and my soul travel up your ever-twisting branches till my gaze gets lost in your five-fingered leaves, tossing sunbits and shadows among them, and your strings of baubles dangling down to me. I thank your seed for having fallen to the earth at this spot at which I've come so many breaths later. And then, having been cradled in Mother Earth, you shot up, zigging and zagging anyway, but straight, choosing your direction the way your bark chooses its colors, following no one's rules. Thank you for the joy your mystery sings to me. So we're going to talk about sketching, and I don't want anybody to say, hey, listen, I can't draw a straight line. Well, that's okay. Because number one, I only know of 2 straight lines in nature. And if you're drawing them, you can use a ruler. Case solved. And it's not a matter of writing poetry that's going to win you a Pulitzer Prize for literature. It's not a matter of drawing a picture that everybody's going to stop and stare at and say how great of an artist you are. It's just a matter of communing with Mother Earth. You might just draw stalks, grass, leaves of grass, maybe 2 leaves of grass. You might draw trees and just forget about the leaves. Just draw the branches and the leaves and the limbs and the trunk. And that's it. Just so you're sitting there looking at this tree, communing with her and drawing her picture. Flowers, maybe you want to take on a flower. If you want to draw a tree, you can start by just drawing one branch, and you're sitting there and you're looking at this one branch and you're seeing where that branch goes off into another branch, and you draw it. Then eventually maybe you'll want to start drawing the trees. If they have leaves that are pointed and jagged or leaves that are just little circles, you can do that. And you can draw details in the bark. They're never straight lines. Or the shading is one on the left, where you see where the shadows of the tree keep the sunshine off of it and make it just a little bit darker. Then you might want to get into color. You can do colored pencils like the one on the left, or watercolors like the one on the right. With watercolors, you get to do things like see where the sun shines through 2 leaves, one overlapping the other. And then whatever else you see. So I'm going to stop with one more poem, and then I'm going to hear from you. A Tree at Night. A tree at day has the sun to sparkle its leaves and to make vivid its browns from its blacks, from its grays, from its greens. But a tree at night without this light is ghostly gray, with its twists and its turns drawing the eye into black. I walked among ancient oaks, stars sprinkling their light through spaces encircled by darkened foliage. One tree called to me. Lean up against me, you who take refuge here from city noise, into my silence. You who take refuge from city lights, behold the dark. Rest against me, look up, lose yourself in me. I will hold you. And she held me, a tiny child, in the embrace of her elder. Okay, it's your turn.
Nice poem. Thank you, Carolfrances.
Thank you. So how many of you feel that I've inspired you? You're going to either write a poem to some part of Mother Earth, a flower, a leaf, a piece of grass, a tree. No, none of you. Okay, one of you. At least one of you is going to try to do that sometime. Tomorrow's Earth Day. Maybe that will be a day that you just take a time to go outside, maybe go to a park. How many think you will draw a picture? Have I inspired you to draw a picture? Come on. Somebody, why have I done this if I'm not inspired?
Okay.
Okay, I got one person.
Do you know nature journaling? I mean, are you aware of the term?
Yeah,
Yeah, because that's basically what you're doing, nature journaling.
yeah.
And it's wonderful. I mean, I know whole groups of people who meet and sit in a park and all do it together as a group.
That's good.
Well, I am writing poems right now. And in drawing a picture, I'm not so sure, but I will,
All right.
especially about the environment. I'm inspired by these poets
Thank
and
you.
everything, just by the earth, just feeling the balance of the planet, just wanting to, when I wake up in the morning, hear about what's happening that's good on the earth. It's good on the sun's rising. We woke up, not someone got somebody by mistake or something else, So I'm really inspired by this, and I'll tell you all, Carolfrances this isn't new to her. We've known each other for quite a while, and this talent is very. She has written. She has I think it was a film. She's a filmmaker, and she's not just an environmentalist, but she's an inspirer. And so thank you for this.
Thank you.
Inspire.
It's all a waste of our time if I'm not inspiring you to do something for Mother Earth.
Yeah.
Just
And
even
I say Mother, Father, even though we say Mother Earth, because it's creating and creating. And it comes through the mother when we see everything, even the birds or all of it. But I still say Mother, Father to balance it out.
well, some indigenous people say Mother Earth, Father Sky. I know St. Francis said Sister Moon, Sister Sun, no, Brother Sun, Sister Moon.
The moon, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I did write a poem once that I'd kind of like to share if you've got some time. Yeah. It was written a number of years ago when I was taking groups up to the mountains and discovered something called minor bees. I don't know if you've ever experienced those. They're minor as in digging holes. Oh. They dig holes in the ground and then I guess they do whatever bees do with those holes. Copulate, do whatever. And they're always buzzing around in the spring. And so I wrote this poem maybe 15, 20 years ago, but it might be fun to share because it's relevant.
Yes.
It's I quote from Gerard Manley Hopkins, "Glory be to God for dapple things." Bustling bands of minor bees buzz back and forth, in and out, zigzagging through the long spring day. Their dizzying dance of life distracts. Where did they get their energy? With furious flutterings of wings, they burrow down and lay their burdens deep in the darkness we can't see. Thank God for buzzing, bustling things, for turmoil in our lives, for thoughts that swerve and swarm and sting, for deep down burrowing, for everything that's underground, waiting to take wing.
I like that. When I think when you presented last year, I think you didn't you study poetry? Was it Anne Sexton?
Yeah.
Yeah. I still think we need to maybe do a larger program, especially because the LA County Library is doing some readings and stuff, and I'm still working on trying to get through. I don't know why it's a labyrinthian process with the library trying to get somebody, but it is. So I'm working on that, and this would be a perfect group to help shepherd that through.
I would like to, when I was a Unitarian, we went to the Benneville Pines, which is a Unitarian gorgeous place in the hills, in the mountains. And I'd love to just do a group with ICUJP where we go to somewhere like that, and I could do a workshop on writing poems to this blade of grass or to this tree or to whatever, and to draw, to sketch, and sketch lightly with a pencil with an eraser, and just keep sketching the lines till you get it to where you want, and then erase the lines you don't want, and then ink it in later. And if you want to color it in with colored pencil or pen, you can do that later. That's what I'd love to do with the group.
I'd love to do it with you.
Yeah, sounds
I'll
like
sign
fun.
up. Beautiful idea.
Field trip.
Mhm.
And Anthony mentioned Gerald Manley Hopkins. In high school, we learned his, I don't even know the name of it, but it's about clouds, and it's cloud puffball, torn tufts, toss pillow. Share with me anything you write, if you want to, or any drawings that you made. I'd love to see that next week or next whenever.
Can I share something that was helpful to me? Because I took a poetry workshop at Pendle Hill, and we were asked to go out and write a poem in like 5 minutes. And I thought, this is ridiculous. But the teacher was very wise, and he quoted William Stafford. That was really helpful. He said, William Stafford wrote a poem every single day from the time he was in CPS camp, on. He would get up first thing in the morning and write a poem. And someone said to Stafford, well, what happens if your poem is not up to your standards? And he said, that's fine. I'll just lower my standards. So I think if we just adopt that attitude that it's okay if you don't write a masterpiece, like Carolfrances said, it can be fun. And sometimes you surprise yourself. I think one of the best poems I ever wrote was during that 5 minutes when I was at Pendle Hill, and went out skeptically thinking, I can't do this. This is ridiculous. And then I sat down and I wrote one of the best poems I'd ever written in 5 minutes.
That's good.
I think that's what it comes from, is noticing something that is either new to you or the perspective is new. There's a great songwriter who passed away a few years ago named Alan Toussaint. One of the great songs he wrote was one called Southern Nights that Glenn Campbell covered. And he talked about when he was young, going to the deeper parts of Louisiana, visiting family that some of them just spoke Creole. And at night, looking at the trees and the moonlight shimmering on the magnolia tree leaves, and how it looked like it reminded him of starling murmurations, how they shift. And that was the impetus for writing the song. And you know, I think one of the best things that I learned from poetry class in college was teachers, you know, suggested every day, look at something very, very carefully and think about what it reminds you of. And you start to get the ability, you start hitting those synapses that help you create context for the world around you, and new ways of looking at something, a deeper understanding. Yeah, I mean, for me, things like poetry and things like music are just ways to get deeper into your mind and stuff. Kind of like what's the idea that Jackson Pollock was actually getting so far into the neurons in his brain and the creativity. That's what he actually was painting, where the synapses and neurons and stuff.
And you know, just listening to everybody, a poem came to my mind that I wrote quite a while ago, 2 years back. It was about moving. Whenever I can, I move. It's not how I do or where I go, but just so long as I do. To feel the wind as it comes through my body, and the sweat on my brow as I surely do. Hey, it's okay, because I'm moving, just so long as I do. To be told, slow down, you're going too fast, the world might pass you by. To you, I say, hey, you're crazy, because I'm moving. Don't ask me why. Snapping your fingers, patting your feet. I don't hear any music. Hey, that's you. Because whenever I can, I move. And just so long as I do. Because I know one day, just as sure as I was born, my feet won't pat and my fingers won't snap. But that day is the day that I don't look forward to. But that day is the day that makes me move like I do. And that was so in what you were saying too, you know, just going out and just looking at a tree or seeing a bird and just whatever it is that inspires you. I know there's a poem in all of us to go forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Ruby. That was really great. I love those poems that you're sharing. That's well, it's 9:16, so is Rose still with us?
I am still there, and I think you are doing an incredible job. You know, really, congratulations. You put this together in just a few days because we had a gap in the agenda, and you should have been booked anytime. I mean, for this, it was so good. Thank you so much.
I want to echo what you said. Thank you, Carolfrances, so much, not just for jumping in, but for the thought, the intellectual content, the human content, the artistic content. It was just terrific.
Thanks.
I want to make an announcement that May 4 is the annual death penalty focus dinner. It's the first time in 3 years that we are returning to an in-person event at the Skirball Cultural Center up on Mulholland. We are honoring a series of individuals that have been instrumental in trying to end the death penalty, both in their lifetimes as well as recently, including 2 exonerees. Paula Mitchell, a lawyer who's defended death row inmates. Diane Russ Tierney, the head of the National Anti-Death Penalty Group that's devoted her whole life to this work. Elizabeth Bruning, a journalist at The Atlantic who examines the criminal legal system and its flaws. And finally, a special announcement that we are honoring Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, who has pledged never to sign a death warrant so long as he is governor of that major state. So we've got some creative music from the New Directions choir, some spoken word, some other special surprises. So I've circulated the registration. We do have the capacity to underwrite scholarships and reduced tickets. If you're available on the evening of May 4, that's Thursday, 2 weeks from yesterday, but the ticket price may present an obstacle. Please contact me and I can speak to the committee that's organizing the event about special tickets. We have the opportunity to make contributions if you're not able to attend the event, or commemorative ads for the honorees. So I will circulate the announcement again to this whole group and the wider group. I think we are at a tipping point in this question of the death penalty. I think we will return, because we must return to the voters to end the death penalty. But we're in the midst of education and advocacy and reducing death sentences. So I do hope you'll support Death Penalty Focus.
Thank you. Does that mean you're going to be in LA at the beginning of May?
Wendy and I are returning for our first trip to LA since we moved away a year ago. So if you needed any other incentive, come and see me at the Death Penalty dinner.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anthony?
Yes, I put this in the chat. Making Housing and Community Happen is having a housing justice forum this Tuesday at 7 p.m. via Zoom, and it's going to focus on the housing needs of people with developmental disabilities. And we have some really outstanding speakers. So I provided a link if you're interested in participating.
Oh, I forgot to say, I just loved today's program, and all the poetry was beautiful and reminded me of doing poetry slams. So
Yep. Yes, I agree with what Sophia just said. It was a wonderful presentation, Carolfrances. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually want to piggyback on what Anthony was just saying. Remember, we were talking about the bill SB4 going through the California legislature. And I discovered yesterday, I didn't know this in advance, that actually the LA City Council is also going to consider supporting it. And there's a public comment section. Unfortunately, I don't have the link. And anyway, you can put your public comments in. And as of yesterday, there were only 2 public comments, one from Studio City Neighborhood Council, one from Tarzana Neighborhood Council, saying they want to keep the single home zoning, and they think the idea of anything being built on church land or on empty property that belongs to churches or schools or whatever is a terrible idea. So I put my comment, and if anybody feels they can navigate through to it, Delighted if other people could put comments as well, because, you know, we feel, well, I think most of us here anyway, feel that empty church lots are a perfect place for affordable housing.
Could you email me that information? Because definitely we want to make sure that they hear from us.
Right.
That's-
I don't have the link. I mean, you'd have to do some exploring. Yeah, I can maybe get it from somebody, because I think it is important. Your problem might be that you don't live in LA, so you might have
Yeah.
to pass that to people who do for the
Okay.
public comment, because they do ask you, you know, where you live.
Okay.
Okay, Carolfrances, can you just?
Sure. Pachamama, Tankashala, Great Spirit, Allah, Jehovah, God, Dios, you who have so many names, you who reflect the colors of so many people, keep us connected with you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Carolfrances.
Thank you.
Man.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rose, for such good facilitation. And thank you, Dr. Ruby, for your wonderful reflection today. And of course, Carolfrances, it was just a terrific program at every level.